Hi. I'm really excited for this. Houston, he texted me. He's like, "Hey, you wanna come interview for a mental health conference?" I'm like, "Yeah." He'd show me, and I ended up following you on Instagram, and I was like, "Oh, she has a book. I need to go to Barnes and Noble." So I went to Barnes and Noble. It was the last book on the shelf.
Woohoo!
Like, I got the last one, and so I've been reading it the past week. So I'm really excited. But yeah, let's definitely hop into this, and I have some questions set up for you. And
Cool.
if you have questions, feel free to ask back.
Yeah, I would
I
say
just yeah
a brief intro to yourself would be awesome. I'm curious to hear about the work that you're doing in Venice too.
yeah definitely. I'll go ahead and start. So hi everybody. My name is Hayden Trowbridge. I'm a mental health advocate as well as a kindness advocate. Really involved with trying to remind people to be human again. That can be through kindness, love, empathy, and vulnerability. All those amazing things that I feel like we've kind of lost touch of. And so today I have the opportunity to interview and have a conversation with the amazing Ione Butler. So I'm going to send it over to her to introduce herself.
Why, thank you. Oh, you're so fabulous at this presenting thing. I like it. My name's Ione Butler. I'm an actress. I do hosting and voiceover, and I also started a platform called Uplifting Content. Having dealt with depression all my life, I started to get my head around ways of dealing with it and wanted to share that with other people because I know what it's like to be just, in these really dark places, and just want to share through uplifting stories and my experiences ways to help people get through those dark times. So that's kind of my passion and one of my missions. And then acting and voiceover is the day job.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that you brought up your story, and I really appreciate your vulnerability. And you talked about this passion that you have for sharing uplifting stories, and so you did release a book called Uplifting Stories, the true tales to inspire you to take action. And so I have been reading that, and in the introduction, you talked about something called the negativity bias, which I found really fascinating, and I feel that the more I think about it, the more I realize how much it plays a role in our lives. And so could you give just a background about what the negativity bias is and the impact that it plays in our lives, especially in young teens' lives?
Totally. So we're programmed biologically to pay attention to threats and dangers. It stems from, caveman times. We need to be aware of our threats for our survival. And so the brain is wired to think that way. But in the modern times, and it's, a reason that people are just in a constant state of stress, we don't have those same physical threats that we did, but we're still always paying more attention to that scary, stressful, fear-mongering news. And I think that's why oftentimes in the news, there's an emphasis on the horror and the fear, like all these awful things that are happening, because they know that that's what people are drawn to watch. And the danger of that is that it has horrible consequences on our mental well-being and our physical well-being. And one of the things I noticed a long time ago, was that I'm very sensitive and I care a lot about people and life and the environment and things. And I was just like so sad watching the news. It was really crippling. And I realized that by cutting it out and not watching it so much, I felt instantly better. And so one of the concepts and the ideas behind my book and the Uplifting Content platform is to say, just be mindful of what you're consuming, because it's having an impact on your mental health. And rather than watch stuff that puts you in a state of fear and causes you stress and anxiety and makes you feel depressed, focus your attention on the stories that inspire you and that remind you of the good in humanity, because these things are all happening. I'm not saying bury your head in the sand and forget that bad things are happening. You can pay attention to the news, but it doesn't need to be all consuming, and we can be careful with the news sources that we go to so that we're getting information in a more compassionate way rather than just a death, hell, everything.
Yeah.
And then focusing on stories that also make us feel great. So that's the idea behind the Uplifting Content platform in the book.
Yeah, and that's amazing. You talked about caring deeply for others, for humanity, for the environment. all these amazing things, and I've kind of come to define that as like almost global empathy. So you feel for the people who are interacting with the world and the world that we're interacting with. And so I think because of this world that we're currently living in, especially now where we can't have that one-on-one interaction with people because of all the lockdowns and everything, we start to see that this virtual space that has been put into this physical world is almost starting to take over. And I know personally it's caused a lot of anxiety in my life. So my next question to you is, what do you think, besides the pandemic and everything and what's going on, but what do you feel as though gets in the way of people making those like physical connections with people that we need for survival, and how does that lead to some more anxiety or mental health problems along the way?
I think that's a question that is really dependent on the personality of the person. You know, when I was doing a lot of Facebook Lives with the uplifting content community, and a lot of questions that people were asking me was, how do you make friends? Like, I don't feel like I've got the friends that I need. And my advice for that was, it's always, it's effort, it's work. Developing friendships and relationships takes effort. You know, and it's also quite difficult because you make friends when you're in school, you make friends when you start a new job, but when you're just kind of living your life, it's hard to be introduced to new people that you can connect with. And so what I always do, if I meet somebody that I really gel with, I do make the effort to connect with them, whether that's like, let's go for a coffee. And I don't just say, let's go for a coffee and then you'll never hear from me again. I say it and I mean it. And I live in LA, and sometimes people are flaky and then they just say it, they agree with it, but they never kind of commit to a day or a time, and it never happens. That's fine, I let them go. But it's this idea of like, we have to nurture those relationships. And another thing is just really, connecting again with the friends and the people in our lives that we already have. Like, that's important, and that takes effort to reach out to someone and be like, I miss you, how are you? Let's jump on a FaceTime, or you know, let's do a Zoom and have a catch up. And I think the question that you'd asked is was it, why is that important? Or
yeah, like what gets in our way, and why is it so important to make those interpersonal connections with others?
Well, I would say, yeah, a huge thing would be fear of rejection. Fear of rejection would be a reason that you would not feel like reaching out and connecting with people. I had another one, but it just left my mind as I was saying fear of rejection. And oh yeah, that's it. Also, being depressed. There was a time where I kind of have this theory about our thoughts, our beliefs become our thoughts become our actions, and our actions become our reality. And there's been times where I felt lonely and depressed. So that's the belief and the thoughts. And because of that, I have not wanted to reach out to anybody because I feel all insecure. So that's my action, not reaching out to anybody. And then that becomes my reality. I'm lonely and depressed because I'm not doing any, because I'm not reaching out to people because I feel like lonely. And so it becomes this cycle. And so I think another thing would be when we're feeling low and not good and worried about what people think, that's another reason for us to not make those connections that we desperately need. And so I guess a productive thing from that would be like, what's the way around that? And I would always say, like, I always just encourage people. I started sharing about my experience with depression, and I was nervous about it because I thought, oh, I'm saying something, you know, that's quite personal. And the response was overwhelmingly positive, with people who just were grateful that I'd shared so authentically. And so I would say to anyone that's like feeling stuck, like, you would be surprised how much people care when you just say, hey, I'm just feeling a bit low. I wanted to chat to a friend. Do you have a minute? Or, you know, I'd love to see you. It's been a while. I miss our friendship. You know, just breaking that thing.
Yeah, it's that extra effort to reach out and be in that moment. One of the stories that stuck out to me in your book was Philip Barb's story, where he talks about he told himself that he was lonely, and it was almost self-inflicted. It's this idea of we isolate ourselves from others, even though others may want us or want to engage with us, but we actually isolate ourselves. So it's this idea of belief, thought, action, and that becomes our reality. So I appreciate your vulnerability and your authenticity, and that leads me into my next question, where Another story that you talked about was Amanda and Adam in the Game of Love, and you shared about an intimate perspective of her life, where she felt as if she had to put on this persona in public because she couldn't be 100% authentically who she was. So when it comes to mental health and anxiety, do you feel that not being 100% who we are really impacts our mental health and maybe the way that we even interact with the world?
Yeah, so just taking back to Amanda's story, she has she's an introvert, and she's very nervous, and so it's a love story about two people that met playing a game, like a out in the world game, and so what's interesting is because she put on the persona to give her confidence to go out and meet people. So yes, she's kind of putting on this thing, but to me, I didn't see it as being a negative thing. It was the armor she used to give her the confidence to go out and connect with people. And she's a beautiful soul who connects with lots of people. So I would say that might be a tool for people who do feel shy to use. Like I've heard Beyonce has like an alter ego character, like other artists have this alter ego character. They just slip into it and then they're just Sasha Fierce or whatever they decide to be. And so I think that might be a nice idea to give to someone who feels like they don't have the confidence, just to kind of imagine yourself as the fiercest, sassiest version of yourself, and then just see if that allows you to go and say hi or do whatever you need to. But I do think being true to who you are, one of the things I've always said is you can lie to other people, but you can't lie to yourself. You just can't. You can try, but so there's no point in trying to lie. And so I think that it is important that we register when we're being inauthentic, and live for ourselves and make life choices that doing things that we want to be doing, not for other people or not to show a certain thing. I do think and I think that it can be very crippling when you're not being yourself, and and it's exhausting to be someone that you're not 24/7.
Yeah, totally. And I think that also ties into one of the other stories, which is of Matthew's story, who he's trying to come out to his family as gay, and he goes into this almost inwards, like, oh my gosh, it's this built up anxiety because I can't be who I want to be. And it's not that he can't be, it's that he doesn't know, he doesn't have the tools to take those steps. So, and you also mentioned that it's living life authentically will feel worlds better than living a lie, like you said, because you know who you are. Right. And it's not that you know who you want to be, it's deep down, it's being reminded, I am who I am, and that's how I have to live.
Yeah. And I just want to touch on that because Matthew came from Louisville, very rural, very Christian town area. And so I can understand the fear and like how difficult that might be when you've spent your whole life being told, he went to Bible class and Sunday school and stuff and was told his whole life that being gay was wrong. And so I can understand how the fear and how difficult that is to to break through all your life of conditioning. It's not just easier. It's not very easy to do it. But in his story, he does say that it's just, as soon as he came out to his parents, just the weight that was lifted off him and how he's so much happier now living life, being who he is. So it is, but I do understand how hard it can be to have the confidence to do that.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that also leads, one of the main things that I wanted to hit on was this idea of anxiety, and this generation especially. You touched on some statistics where it was 1 in 5 American adults, or roughly 60 million, suffer from mental health issues. And then there's about 123 suicides per day, or almost every 11 minutes. And that's a shocking, when I first read that, I was like, whoa. That blew my mind. And as someone who believes that they're deeply involved in mental health practices, but also advocacy, hearing that numbers is so shocking. And I think a lot of the reason that is because there are resources, but people don't know how to tap into those. Or as a man in mental health, that's another thing that you touched on was in Philip's story was, as a man, he felt like he'd been conditioned to, be the manly man, not talk about his emotions, hide all of his feelings. And so I guess my question to you is, what are some ways that we can, as a generation, almost normalize talking about these difficult topics? Because when you hear that, you're like, oh, avoid, do not talk about, right? When you hear those statistics, because it's like, that's scary, I don't want to go into that. So how are some ways that we go about having conversations around our mental health? It can be, I'm just feeling sad today, or maybe it's those deeper, more vulnerable talks that are very necessary to building up that or breaking down that stigma of mental health.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of gave a great answer in there already. So yeah, interestingly with Phil, he's from the Midwest, and that's definitely, men don't talk about feelings. You just get on with it and deal with it. And that's like a societal thing that needs to change, and I feel like is slowly changing. But the ways that we break the stigma is just doing exactly what we're doing right now. Like it takes people like us who are brave enough to share about our experiences, because I don't like to be somebody that tells people you should do this, but I talk about my experiences, and this is what I've done, and this is what it helps, as a way of just like offering options for them to hear. Also, I try to be very careful on social media to not just be like, oh, I'm just a perfect, flawless person and my life is amazing, because that's not true, and I struggle. So I try to be honest about what's going on so that other people can see it. So that's one thing that we who want to take more of an active approach to help others can do in a more personal setting. I feel like it's just being mindful of our friends and loved ones and reaching out to somebody when they are in need, and just saying, hey, are you okay? I'm worried about you. Or, if you want to chat, I'm here. Or, I love you. And if there's anything you ever need to talk about, please know that you can talk to me. That's what we can do for our friends. And then just in ourselves, just open up, open up and share. And what I would say is, like, for anybody that tries to open up to somebody and then their friends or family don't know how to deal with it, don't let that dishearten you. Some friends just aren't very good they don't know what to say. And so if you don't get the most comforting, loving, reassuring thing, don't be disheartened. But don't give up. Like my biggest thing is that people are suffering and struggling in silence, and it is so unnecessary, because like 50 people around you, over like 10 of them are probably feeling a similar type of thing. So there's no need for you to suffer in silence. You're not alone. These things that you're feeling aren't like, you're not broken, you're not wrong. Like we're all suffering in these similar ways. So don't feel like you should be ashamed or that you can't open up about it.
Yeah. That's so good. And I want to acknowledge your passion. Like I can see how excited you get, and I'm so happy that there's people like you out in this world that are just so passionate about these topics that need to be talked about. And that's been something that I've been trying to define for the past 2 years. I just turned 18, and really just the past, I guess, really year of my life has been dedicated to, how are we solving these problems? And what I realized is that it's all tied back to this idea that we're human. And sometimes we forget to be. We forget the basic necessities in our lives, that we need these interpersonal connections, authentic human conversations. And so I kept going down this path of, so what does it mean to be human? What are the things that we do need, right? We need the food, we need the water. There's the pyramid, Maslow's pyramid or whatever, of a hierarchy of needs. But when I took it down, I go, okay, there are some basic things that we need, and I think those are kindness, right? We need to be treated with kindness, and we need to treat others with kindness. We need to be unconditionally loved, and then also a sense of empathy needs to happen for conversations to happen. And then the fourth thing that ties us all together is vulnerability. So being first vulnerable with ourselves, and then being vulnerable with others. And this is the idea of being intentionally human. So another word for intentional that I'm starting to define is being present. And so my next question to you is, how can we as humans, intentional humans, be more present in our daily lives to reduce anxiety, to maybe clear up some of the mental health stigma, and just what are ways that with our friends, with our families, that we can go about having conversations, but being present in those moments when we are maybe feeling super sad, or maybe even feeling super happy?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. Because I feel like it's important to feel feelings and to feel feelings, and then also just to have awareness. So for me, when it comes to like anxiety and stuff like that, I see it as like a red flag that something is amiss, that I'm worrying about something, my thoughts, my thinking is in a bit of a funky place. So I use that as like a check-in. And so for me, awareness is just presence, is awareness. Just sitting with that. Sitting with that feeling, allowing yourself to feel the feeling, and asking yourself where the root of these feelings or thoughts are coming from. And so, yeah, I would just say having time to just, from time to time, just checking in with yourself. If you're feeling sad, being okay feeling the sadness, and then just asking where that's coming from. If you're feeling anxious, I always say just to like stop and sit and breathe and like meditate and just sit on that for a second, and check in. So I think that answers the question. Having a moment to be aware and taking stock of the feelings and the thoughts and what's happening. That's how I find presence, or it can be intentional.
Yeah, I love that. Taking stock of your feelings and making sure that you're understanding, maybe not understanding the emotions, but saying, I'm feeling this emotion. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Because the interesting thing is, sorry, I know we're running out of time. The interesting thing is, it's this idea, like everybody, a lot of the depression and anxiety comes from identifying with our thoughts, right? I suck. I'm going to die alone. No one's going to love me. I have no talent. And it's listening. It's that noise, and then believing that noise to be true. And so when you have awareness and you're present, you're taking yourself out of the thinking, and you're observing. I'm listening. It's no longer I suck, I'm gonna die alone, nobody cares about me, I have no talent. You're being aware. You're separating yourself from the stuff that's causing the suffering and paying attention to it. So that to me is presence, coming out of the thinking mind and just being present as life energy. Got the spiritual.
Yeah, like Houston said, who he probably heard it from someone else, and he heard it from someone else. It's like, just there's a difference between being a human being and a human doing. We need to spend more time being rather than doing. Removing those thoughts from the human. And that leads me to my final question, where you did talk about it in your book, was pursuing purpose, pursuing your passions, which really help to alleviate these depressions and these anxious moments, because we know that there's something greater. And so I'm going down a purpose journey, my purpose being reminding people to be human. But a couple people that I look up to, Jay Shetty, he talks about purpose as service to others and awakening the inner wisdom. Simon Sinek talks about purpose as defining the why before the how and the what. So my question to you would be, how do you define purpose? And how does that allow us to cope and with our mental health?
Yeah, I don't have a clever line like either of those, but I would definitely say having a purpose that is being in service and doing things for others is really important. But I think it's just what makes your heart sing, like what lights your soul on fire. What is it that when you do it, you feel just, follow your bliss, you feel good. And so it could be something creative, it could be, I always feel like so that, for me, I find that my joy, my love is acting. But when I get messages from people who have been helped by some of the work that I've done, like that feels beautiful too. So I guess it's just listening to what lights you up, what sets your soul on fire, and as much as possible trying to make what you're doing benefit and be in service of other people, because I think that is just the ultimate, because it just keeps coming back. It feels amazing.
Yeah, purpose is definitely the antidote, I think, for mental health, and mostly because it's a selfishly selfless thing. Like you're doing your purpose because it feels good for you, but most of the time your purpose is in service to others. It's in finding the joy in helping others. So it's selfishly selfless, but I love how you define it as it is an act of service towards others, and it is following your bliss. I don't know, I've heard that before. I can't pinpoint who said it.
Lots of people have said it.
Yeah. I was watching a documentary recently about following your bliss, and it's true. It's following that bliss, following your passions, following your purpose is the antidote to a more not fleeting happiness life, but a deeply fulfilled life, I believe.
Yes, and so sometimes people struggle to know what their purpose is, and so the following your bliss is a good way to set for people that are in that position, because it's kind of this discovery phase. You know, you try different things, you see what works, you go down that rabbit hole, you lean into the things that feel good. That to me, I think is a good use of following your bliss, because it helps you in that right direction. And another thing with purpose, I would say, a friend of mine, acting is my main career trajectory, but there was getting to a point where I was just so disappointed that I wasn't, a big Hollywood actor in blockbusters and doing all these crazy things. And it was becoming I was depressed about it because I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be. And my friend said, you should just give up. And I was horrified that he said that. And he said, but it's not making you happy. And so another thing that I would say is when it comes to your purpose and your passion, it should not be something that is, always strive, always be going towards it, but don't let it get to the point where you are depressed about it, because then that's not what you should, it's not a good energy to put into it, So I think that's important to remember.
Yeah. Finding the why before the what and the how. Yeah, that's amazing. I appreciate you taking the time, and this has been very eye-opening, and I love your passion. I love your excitement around this, and I think telling uplifting stories and sharing uplifting content is definitely the way that going forward, because it fills us up. It deeply fulfills us. It provides that sense of, wow, there's good people out there. There are great people out there, overwhelmingly more great people out there. So thank you for taking the time, and I appreciate your excitement and your vulnerability.
Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm so excited for all the things you're going to accomplish, because you're incredible. So thank you for being the light that you are in the world. It's amazing.